I was appalled to learn of the brutal murder of Boris Nemtsov last weekend, as indeed the overwhelming majority of the Irish people were. Mr. Nemtsov was a prominent opposition politician in Russia, and his RPR Parnas political party is a member of ALDE, the same political grouping that Fianna Fáil is affiliated to at a European level. Over the course of his life, Mr. Nemtsov worked to speak up for the most marginalised in Russian society. He was a committed Democrat who fought to strengthen the political institutions in Russia, and he highlighted the scourge of corruption at every opportunity. In recent months, he had also been an outspoken critic of the conflict in the Ukraine, which has claimed so many innocent lives. The murder of Boris Nemtsov must also act as a warning sign to all people who believe in liberal democracy, both in Europe and in Russia. And it's evident that all is not well with the political system in Moscow. The increasing Russian aggression towards its neighbours and internally towards political opponents is a most frightening development. From what we see and listen to through the media reports, there appears to be an increasing culture of fear in Russia. State authorities are said to act in an exceptionally partisan way in how law and order is maintained and in how laws are implemented. It seems that the regime in Moscow is exhibiting increasingly fascist-like tendencies where state and party merge into one, and some opponents are even forced to leave the country. We are all aware of the desperate carnage with the loss of life of so many innocent people, and we think of one particular incident alone with the death of 298 innocent people with the shooting down of the civilian aircraft MH19. I mention that in the context of the current Russian foreign policy that has resulted in war in the Ukraine with untold devastation and the undermining of that country's sovereignty. And as a parliament, we should be very conscious of the sovereignty of other nations. The West has responded with sanctions which have had an impact but have not provided a long-term solution. Even Ireland, a Cathaoirleach, a country which has traditionally had a distinctly cordial relationship with Russia, has been touched by this aggression through the infringement of Irish-controlled airspace by Russian military aircraft. This, we have learned, resulted in commercial air traffic having to be diverted or suspended when travelling to and from Irish airports. And this is an issue that the Minister and Minister Flanagan need to take up directly with their counterparts in the Russian government. I know from question time here last week that the Minister had instructed senior officials in his department to meet with the ambassador and senior officials from the Russian embassy. But I think at this stage, with another recorded infringement of Irish-controlled airspace, that it is time for the Minister and Minister Deenahan to raise this matter directly with the Russian authorities and to state very clearly that any infringement of Irish-controlled airspace is not acceptable. Thank you, Cathaoirleach.
Thank you very much, Deputy. And Minister, 4 minutes, please.
I thank Deputy Smith for raising this important matter. In the early hours of last Saturday morning, a prominent Russian opposition leader, Boris Nemtsov, was shot dead in central Moscow. His murder was a brutal and cowardly act which was met with widespread shock and disbelief. My colleague, Minister Flanagan, has expressed his deep sadness at Mr. Nemtsov's death and extended his sympathies to his family. Tributes has poured in for Mr. Nemtsov since his death. He served his country with distinction in many roles, including as former Deputy Russian Prime Minister under President Yeltsin. Mr. Nemtsov was a courageous champion of democratic reforms and a strong advocate for a more open and tolerant Russia. His loss will be deeply felt not just in Russia but around the world. The high regard in which Mr. Nemtsov was held was evident by the large crowd that attended a vigil in his honour on Sunday. Some 50,000 people turned out to mourn his loss and honour his life. While the vigil march included a wide range of political parties and movements, the attendance of so many ordinary Russian citizens was notable. Their presence in such numbers was a tribute to his legacy as a fearless reformer who was not afraid to speak out against the direction that Russia was taking and the politics being pursued by the current government. Large numbers of mourners also attended his memorial service yesterday. As was the case with most other EU member states, Ireland was represented at the service by our ambassador to Russia. Mr. Nemtsov's murder highlighted the vulnerability of opposition figures in Russia at the present time, where any form of criticism of the government is seen as an act of disloyalty. He had been a vocal critic of Russia's actions against Ukraine. In fact, the vigil on Saturday in honour of Mr. Nemtsov replaced an opposition demonstration which he had been instrumental in organising to protest against the economic crisis and Russia's role in the destabilisation of the Ukraine. President Putin has condemned the killing. His spokesperson said that the president had written to Mr. Nemtsov's mother, promising that he would personally oversee the investigation into her son's murder. Many theories are in circulation as to the motives for Mr. Nemtsov's murder. For this reason, it is all the more important that the Russian authorities promptly conduct a full and transparent investigation into his killing and that the perpetrators of this callous crime are brought to justice. There should be no culture of impunity in the face of such an appalling deed. It is also important that the rights to freedom of assembly and expression that Mr. Nemtsov fought so fearlessly to defend are recognised and fully protected.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Smith, you have 2 minutes to conclude.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cathaoirleach, and I thank the Minister for his response. I think as a society what we all need are better relations with Russia on a political, social and economic basis, which will be for the mutual benefit of both countries and of course in the context of the European Union. There is great potential there to obviously grow trade for the benefit of Ireland, the European Union and Russia. But there is one thing that the European Union and our own country cannot flinch from, being very, very strong advocates of the need for democratic reforms in Russia, and also, as the late Mr. Nemtsov did as well, acted as a very, very strong advocate for a more open and tolerant Russia. What we have seen in recent times is not acceptable, and our own government, at head of government level and also at government minister level, we must convey in the strongest possible manner to the Russian authorities that what has been happening and what has been developing is not acceptable, and there must be no stone literally left unturned to bring to justice the people who carried out that hideous murder of an excellent man who was doing important political work in difficult circumstances. And I think, Cathaoirleach, the most important lesson that we can learn from the brutal killing of Mr. Nemtsov is that we can no longer ignore what is happening in Russia. We can no longer say it has no impact on us. We can no longer turn a blind eye when another political opponent of the current regime is silenced, or when more innocent victims are killed in the Ukraine or elsewhere. And we have seen recent reports as well of concerns in some of the other Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, also Norway, elsewhere expressing concerns as well in relation to Russian aggression. Our own government and all our partners in the European Union must say loud and clear, this is not acceptable. If you continue these actions, we will not tolerate them. That's a message that has to go clearly to President Putin and to his government.
Thank you.
We cannot pretend, in conclusion, Cathaoirleach, that the present Russian government and president are our ally. Actions that have the characteristics of an enemy mean you are an enemy. A change in policy by President Putin and his government is needed to build better relations with the European Union and indeed with the rest of the world as well. And what happened last weekend, once again, was an appalling attack on an innocent man, resulting in the loss of life, and literally an attack on democracy as well. Thank you, Cathaoirleach.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, as I noted in my opening statement, the murder of Boris Nemtsov is an appalling act against what must be fully and effectively investigated. I believe that a failure to find and prosecute Mr. Nemtsov's killers would raise serious questions about Russia's criminal justice system. As I have said already, a culture of impunity must not be allowed to develop in Russia and cannot be tolerated. In remarks on behalf of all EU member states at yesterday's memorial service, the head of the EU delegation to Russia said that Mr. Nemtsov's personified values that we hold dear: respect for human dignity, commitment to democracy, a strong civil society, and the need for authorities to be publicly accountable. Defending and promoting those fundamental values is becoming increasingly difficult in Russia today. Developments in recent years in terms of political pluralism and civil liberties have certainly been disappointing. Although our perspectives may sometimes differ, it is important that we should continue to engage with Russia on all areas, including those such as political pluralism, the role of civil society, and civil liberties generally.
Very much, and that concludes that topical issue. I thank the Minister and indeed I thank the Deputy.